Now we're at the start of our second week of the sitting fortnight here in Canberra, and joining us now to discuss politics of the day is Senator Pauline Hanson. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for rushing up. We just were watching you in the House just a moment ago. So you've introduced a private members bill. You want a national plebiscite on migration levels.
Yes, I do. I want to give people the say, have their say. Do you think the current rate of migration to Australia is too high? Governments have lacked, I don't care whether it's the Liberal or Labor, National Party, they've all said we're not going to give people a say in the immigration levels into Australia, and I think we need to. England didn't do it, and they kept bringing huge numbers in, cost to the economy, and now hence the Brexit. People have had their say, and a lot of people said we want to get out of Brexit because of the immigration.
The government's reduced the cap from 190,000 to 160,000.
Yeah, right. It's all smoke and mirrors, I can tell you.
What number do you think it should be at?
In the budget papers they delivered last May, it was 271,000 in the budget papers that they put the numbers at. They brought it down 190,000. They said we're going to reduce it to 160,000, but basically they've held up on processing of a lot of people. So on top of that, you've got about over 500,000 students in the country. You've also got the 400 or 457 visa holders people refer to. You're looking at about 90,000 there. You've got other visa holders coming in the country.
So what cap would you like?
Look, at the moment, Tony Abbott said about 110,000. He's changed his tune since he's been out of politics. He wished he had a different number when he was in as Prime Minister. I think, look, bring it back to around about 800,000 at the moment, 80 to 100,000. Let's stabilise. Let's ensure that we've got the infrastructure in place before we increase the numbers. You see, governments have actually used immigration to prop up our economy, GDP. So they said 3% GDP growth in the country, whereas immigration is tied to that by 1.7%. And our actual growth in industries and services is 1.3%. So they've relied on immigration to prop up our industries and manufacturing, the growth that we had there, that we no longer have.
What is wrong with that, though, to have migration support our economy? We're a migration nation, and we've got unemployment is record lows.
There's a Ponzi scheme. It's got to stop at some time. You can't keep increasing the numbers when it has an effect on a person's way of life and standard of living. And do you want to go to Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane now, and on the roads there it's like parking lots. It's about losing a quality of life. How long do you have to wait to get to see a specialist in this country or book to get into a hospital? These are the impact that it's having on our schools, on our roads, on our water. When was the last huge water project they put in? Since 2007, we've increased the population by 25%, 5 million people.
But isn't it more incumbent upon the states to keep up with infrastructure? Don't you put blame at the feet of the states and others for not building appropriate infrastructure?
No, the government's been saying they've put $75 billion into infrastructure, but where is that basically happening? I've heard about the $75 billion for the last 3 years since I've been in this place, and then they say now it's up to $100 billion. It's okay to put that on paper, and even the infrastructure, Larry, he actually said that we need to actually put it into infrastructure projects which will create and drive the employment and the growth of the country. Bringing in migrants, that a lot will actually end up on our welfare program, is not the way to go.
But most actually are productive, aren't they? The numbers would suggest that most migrants are younger, skilled, and add to the economic bottom line as opposed to detract from it.
That's what they do say, if they get jobs. But when you've had over the last if we bring in 250,000 or 300,000 a year under Labor, under Rudd, it's over 300,000 a year. What you're doing, if the government says they've created 1 million jobs, all we're doing is getting jobs for those people that are here, that we're bringing in. So there's a lot of Australians that are underemployed who would dearly love to have more work. About 1 million are actually underemployed, would like to get more work. So it's finding the balance there. The government, their whole attitude, they were bloody minded down there and listening to their whole argument, is my question is, put it to the people. Let the people have a say.
That doesn't really give...
They don't want the people to
It's not a long-term solution, though, is it? We couldn't have a national plebiscite every year to decide on migration levels. Do you want a permanent cap on migration?
No, we've always have brought migrants into the country, by all means. But my argument is, why don't we look at why Australian people aren't having children? They're only basically having 2. Why don't we look at that issue? Because Australians are actually only having 2 because they know they can't get decent education, they can't afford to have them. You've got both parents having to work to pay the bills. So that is a problem. I'd like to see the homegrown Australian, as Paul Keating said. Why not look at it that way? Why bring in migrants? A lot of these people, a far better life for them here, and that's why they come here. But there are a lot that come here purely to have numbers of kids that we're paying for, the taxpayer, and that's not good enough.
Treasury, incidentally, I'm only having 2 kids because my wife won't let me have any more, but on the cost of the cut, Treasury says 30,000 cut would see a hit to the budget of $500 million. If we take the cut you're talking about, that's $1 billion a year in terms of lost economic growth.
Isn't it amazing that they've relied on all our growth on immigration? And yet, you know, after the war we had a lot here, but when you go back 2 years ago, we were such a prosperous country, when you look prior to the war, that we were growing. We had so much infrastructure projects, yet a low immigration. So
but you accept that it would hit the budget
we can do it.
If we adopted your number?
Not if we actually then put the money into infrastructure projects. And I've spoken about the hybrid Bradfield scheme that we need to build to get water from North Queensland down. You do these infrastructure projects, build more dams, as I've been, you know, quoted by the institution of saying them right. Yeah.
Sorry, just before you go, why aren't you supporting this inquiry into Angus Taylor's, it's called Grassgate now, interests in this corporation that the Labor's saying he didn't quite declare properly?
Because it's a witch hunt. And I did. I looked at this. We're going back to when he made those emails, was in April of March, April 2017. Isn't it funny it's come out after this period of time? And I support Angus Taylor because not an investigation into him, have an investigation into these natural grasses, and they're shutting down the farming sector by saying that you can't, you know, get rid of these. It's not nutritional grass. It's just shutting down our farming in Australia. He has every right to ask questions about that, and I support him on doing that. This is a witch hunt.
Pauline Hanson, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Coming up after the break, an Aussie crosses the line. First.